Ladies and Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear friend, it's always a great pleasure to be back in Thailand. This morning we are going to be presenting the world competitiveness in Thailand and the environment. But before doing so, I would like, on behalf of Dr. Rosley and myself, to express our thanks for the host of this meeting who have been kind enough to invite us again. Of course, the TMA, who is our partner in establishing the World Competitiveness Yearbook and the Report on Competitiveness, the Board of Trade, of course, and I would like also to thank the Institute of Directors and others who have put together this conference on such an important topic as competitiveness. Actually, Dr. Rossler and myself, we have shared the work in two parts. After the break, she has a difficult responsibility to present the competitiveness of Thailand in our various reports. And before the break, I have the easy part. I will present the context of competitiveness in the business environment, which is affecting all of us. And that's why I think it's important that we speak not only about the environment, but about the mindset of competitiveness as it was asked for us. So let's embark into this journey on competitiveness and see what's happening around us. And let's keep in mind it's very difficult to make any forecast. John Kenneth Galbraith used to say the following. He used to say, actually, the only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology respectable. And obviously, when you try to see what has been happening during the past 10 years, it's very difficult. All these events are less than 10 years old, whether it is Wikipedia, Facebook, YouTube, the iPad, the human genome, Facebook. This is less than 10 years old and it has changed the world. How can we foresee what's going to happen in the next 10 years? This is really the challenge. That's the first thing. The second thing which is interesting with this chart is that every product, with the exception of the euro, was born in California. And now California is bankrupt. Which tells us we have to make the difference between the competitiveness of countries and the competitiveness of enterprises. This is very important. And this change in performance is absolutely essential. If you are looking at countries, in many parts of the world, the countries and the governments have a huge problem. A problem of debt. If you are looking at the US and Europe combined, it's about $27 trillion of debt, which is huge. On the other hand, surprisingly enough, the companies are doing very well. If you just take the United States of America, which has been downgraded, as you know, from AAA to 2A+, we have the American companies sitting on $1,240 billion in cash, and just Apple is having $72 billion in cash. So the companies are performing much better than the government, and I think we should keep that in mind in the world economy. By the way, this is supposed to be the next headquarters of Apple, so when you have money, you can do a lot of things interesting. The bad news has been obviously the cost of this recession for everybody. If you are taking the US and Europe, basically we have spent about the same amount of money to save the economy, about 27% of the GDP on both sides of the Atlantic. In terms of money, it means $7,200 billion have been spent to save the world economy from a depression. This is a huge amount of money, and probably we are going to see more money being spent in the autumn to save the world economy of a second dip. This is so much money that probably doesn't mean anything to any of us anymore. And as President Ronald Reagan said one day very nicely, remember, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and he added, sooner or later we shall be talking about money. And we are talking about huge amount of money, which is so huge that we have a tendency to lose relationship with the amount of money which is involved. And therefore we are faced with a new age of capitalism. Until the crisis in 2008, most probably we were into a period of enterprise capitalism where the companies were in the leadership and where the name was shareholders' value. After the crisis in 2008, we came into a different world of state capitalism where now more and more the government are in charge of the economy everywhere around the world, and we are confronted with an increased tendency for economic nationalism. And this means that the operating system, the mindset in the world economy is different today than it was to be. And this is going to change completely the way we are going to operate in business. So the question is, how can we be successful in this type of environment? And I feel that part of the answer was found by our Indian friends. In India, there is a saying which says the following: our economy grows at night, and they add, when the government is sleeping. Now, I'm glad the minister has left, so I can now speak freely. I will not tell you how to make the government sleep, of course. However, this is an important statement. We have to work better with governments in order to find out what's happening. Now, you know, the big question today is, do we risk a double dip? Are we going to have a second recession because the numbers are not very good? And obviously, we were in a situation where Mr. Bernanke told everybody the following: it is over, go back to work. But the recession may be over. The consequences of the recession are not over. And I think this is what is really the issue today. We are all struggling with the consequences of the recession. And I want to show you the latest number. In yellow, this is Q2, the second quarter. In blue, it's Q1, the first quarter. So we don't have the data for every country altogether. In Thailand, you have been growing 2.6% on a 12-month period of time during the second quarter. This is what you have in Europe. And as you can see, it's a very unequal situation. Certain countries doing very well, like Sweden and Germany until recently. Some countries are in a very tough situation, like Spain and Italy and Greece, as you can imagine. If you look east, Russia, 4.1% is okay. Central Europe is a little bit flat. Look at Turkey, growing 11%. Probably it shows that this country is growing too fast and will generate inflation. This is important to keep in mind. This is what's happening in Latin America, where you will see also some good news in countries like Chile, growing more than 9%. Argentina also growing more than 9%. But here you have to relax. The numbers are wrong. It's just because we are going into elections. So we are in a situation where it's very unequal. Brazil is doing well. But the real interesting situation for you, of course, is to compare to what's happening in Asia and to the countries next to you. And of course, here you have a very unequal situation, but countries like Thailand are doing well, Malaysia, India, Hong Kong, and of course China at 9.5%. One country is missing there, of course, the United States of America, and the Q2 number are disquieting, 1.6%. We were used to much better from the US, and the US is still the locomotive of the world economy. Very important for Thailand, just as Japan, minus 1% because of the events. So these are a little bit disquieting news, but this is on a 12-month period of time. Now, if you want to see if the economy is stable, going up or going down, it's like a plane. You are not looking on a 12-month period of time. You should look on quarter over quarter. And this is the situation quarter over quarter, Q2 on Q1, Q1 on Q4. And as you can see, Japan is in recession. Europe is flat. The UK has been growing 0.7%, just a little bit. This was a consequence of the royal wedding. It has pushed really the economy up. Probably they should do that more often. Germany disquieting of this quarter. Spain flat. You had a little dip in Thailand because Q2 was not very good, you know it. And again, the US 1.3%. This is a little bit flat. I think we should be able to do better. These are numbers, and numbers are boring, so I have tried this morning to do something else. I would like to present to you the World Economic Weather Map as I present to you the weather on TV. And this is where we are. In the US, it is stormy. Good weather, bad weather, and with the irony, it's even worse weather than expected. So this is a little bit stormy. If you look at Europe, it is relatively uncertain. Part of Europe is good news, Germany, Scandinavia. Part of Europe is bad news. It's raining on the United Kingdom, but it's always raining on the United Kingdom. The south of Europe is a little bit overcast, not good news. Latin America is improving very well with the exception of Venezuela. There is a wind of change on Africa. We are not quite sure in which direction, but it's changing. It's a bit stormy in Russia. It's not a good weather at all in Japan. It is uncertain in Australia, and a very important market for your export. And there is a heat wave on Asia. And I think when you are looking at the world economy that way, it tells you one very important thing. The world economy is not in sync anymore. Every kind of business model is possible here. You have countries in recession like Spain and Greece. You have countries overeating like China and Turkey. You have countries which are risking inflation like India and Brazil, and you have countries risking deflation like Japan. Every model is valid, and we have never seen the world economy in such a state of desynchronization going into every direction. And I think this explains also the fact that this economic recovery is probably the weakest we have on the record. This is what happened when you go in a recession. The three large economies goes in recession, and this is the recovery before this one. 4 years later, we were up quite a lot, and the economic recovery today has two characteristics. Number one, it is weaker than the one before, and number two, the U.S. is much closer to Europe than before. In general, the U.S. was pulling up the world economy. For the first time, the U.S. is not doing that job, and that's why everybody is worried, because the U.S. seems to be less and less a locomotive to the world economy. In this type of environment, of course, what really makes a difference is consumption. If you are looking at the world economy today, it can be split in two. Part of the world economy, which is basically the U.S., Europe, Japan, is an economy of replacement. It means that when you purchase a product, it's because you want to replace an older product. You buy a cellular phone, it is to replace an old one. You buy a TV set, it's to replace an old one. You buy a car, it's to replace your old car. Which means the following. In this type of economy, whenever you have a recession, the people can just stop to buy and wait without experiencing a drop in their standard of living. Last year, I didn't buy a new cellular phone, and I was still happy, which is a catastrophe for the phone industry. So basically, we are in a situation where part of the world has the possibility to wait in terms of recession, and this brings consumption down. But there is another part of the world where it is what we call a first buy economy. This is my first cellular phone, my first sofa, my first car. I do not want to wait. If I have money, I buy. And this is what we find in the emerging market, which means I buy now. And this is why consumption is so different in the so-called advanced economy and in the so-called emerging market, because you have this pressure on consumption that we don't have in the US and in Europe anymore. A very good example of how this economy world is split is that you have the economy of what I call I need it. I need a product, I don't want to wait, emerging market, I buy it now, and now you have on the side the economy of I want it. I maybe not need it, but I want it. The best example I know about this split in the world economy is the iPad. Nobody in his right mind needs an iPad. There is no camera, at least in the number one. There is no flash. There is no USB, nothing. But everybody wants one. The marketing was, you don't need it, you want it. So you say, I didn't know I want it, so now I will buy it. So basically, we are in a new world where the consumption is going to be very different. And the problem with, in the emerging market, whether it is in Thailand, in China, in India, we see an explosion of credit. This is credit as a percentage of GDP. In Brazil, 46%. In India, 60%. In China, 140%. Credit is exploding everywhere at a growth rate of about 17 to 20%. This is private household credit. And of course, the objective is to catch up with the US, 360%. I think we are all in the right direction, but I think the explosion of credit is a very, very serious concern for the world economy. Some of you may remember, in the year 2000, the name of the game was shop until you drop. You remember? Shop until you drop. Well, congratulations, it's done. We have been doing so much and so much shopping that now we are in this situation where basically it's very dangerous. So where are the breaking points for the world economy? The first one is about debt. In 2007, the debt of the G20 was 78% of the GDP. Now we are today at 106%. So we have this explosion, and most probably we are going to reach 120% before it starts to go down. This is much too big. But this is not the entire story. If you are looking at debt in order to find out the vulnerability of countries, you need to look not only at the amount of debt as a percentage, and as you can see, for example, Japan has the highest percentage of debt as compared to the GDP, 204%. The real issue is to whom you own your debt, and this is a foreign ownership of the debt. And you see a very different situation. A country like Portugal has 80% of its debt owned to the rest of the world. Greece, 75%, but Japan has only 7%, which means most of the debt is owned inside Japan. This is a very different approach because it tells you the vulnerability you have for your debt. The second very important impact is when you have to repay your debt. If you are looking at the United States of America, this is quite important, a very significant part of the debt is coming to maturity until the very next future, which is 2014. So it's not only the foreign ownership, it's when you have to repay the debt, and when the U.S. will have to refinance itself, it will refinance itself at a higher level than today because of the downgrading and Standard & Poor's and Moody's. This is a very disquieting situation, which will have an impact also on the U.S. situation. The second aspect which is important is the social cost. The minister has addressed this situation now. And let's look at the unemployment around the world. In Thailand, you are doing very well. You are really into full employment. But this is not the case of the rest of the world, especially the advanced economy. As you can see, the U.S. has 9% unemployment and Europe 9.7%. Look, a country like Spain is 20% unemployed. Worse than that, in our opinion, is the youth unemployment. I think an economy is competitive when it is able to provide jobs to the younger generation. And here you are saying that you are doing relatively well in Thailand, 3.9%, but the youth unemployment, which is between 16 to 24 years old, in the U.S., 18.5%, in Europe, 20%, and in Spain, 42%. When you are in a situation where the economy cannot provide jobs to the younger population, you have a real social time bomb, and we need to solve this issue. So I think we are going to be dealing with the social cost again and again. And the third aspect, which is a breaking point in the making and which is particularly appropriate to raise here in Thailand, is for the first time we have inflation back on the radar screen. You know that the appropriate level of inflation should be around 2%. This is the objective of the Fed, the objective of the European Central Bank. Germany is about there. We are a bit under. In Thailand, you are above 3%, above 4% even going up. These are the countries which are a little bit higher, between 3 and 5%. And these are the countries which start to have a problem: Brazil, India, Russia. Russia and India are almost at 10%. I think for the first time we start to have inflation coming back into the picture, and inflation is going to be a very serious issue. And I think some countries around the world will have to deal with this, and probably it could be an issue for Thailand. The question is to define inflation. And the best definition I could find about inflation is the following. Follow me carefully. Inflation is paying $15 for an haircut, which used to cost $10 when you are there. I don't know why, but I like this definition very much. So, we are in a world where basically inflation is paying more for less. And this is exactly the situation we are going to go. Now, inflation is a big temptation for governments. It's a big temptation because inflation is boosting consumption. Remember, if people know that the price of goods is going to be more expensive in 6 months from now, they are going to buy now instead of 6 months. In a deflation environment, if people feel that the price of goods is going to be cheaper in 6 months, they will wait 6 months until they buy. So inflation boosts consumption. Second temptation, especially for Europe and the US, inflation reduces the value of debt. In the past, 50% of the nominal value of debt of the world was repaid through inflation. So when you have a lot of debt, actually you like inflation. It's a very nice way to repay for your debt. But it's a very dangerous thing, inflation, because this is destroying capital and labor. And as Milton Friedman said one day, inflation is taxation without legislation. And I think we have to be very careful about the impact of inflation. I fear that inflation is going to be back in many countries. We are then confronted to the problem of the deficit and the burden of deficit. And I want to give you an update on the legacy of the United States of America because it is going to have an impact on all of us. We should remember that when President Clinton left the White House in 1999, he left with a budget surplus of $236 billion. $236 billion. 10 years later, when President Obama comes into the White House, he finds a deficit of $1,845 billion. $2,000 billion difference in 10 years. Obviously, in between, there must have been somebody. No name. And in 2010, the president is confronted to a deficit of $1,560 billion. Enormous. By the way, as you can see, 2009, these are the official picture of the president. 2009, the president is smiling. 2010, he's not smiling anymore because he realized that the deficit of the United States of America is $4 billion a day. And when you are confronted with this situation where the largest economy in the world is running a budget deficit of 8.9%, every single other country in the world feels obliged to compete with it with great success. The winner being Thailand, minus 14%, and everybody else is a sinner, everybody else is overspending. And actually in Thailand you are doing pretty well, minus 3.1%. This is for the moment acceptable, but everybody else is in a bad situation. So we are in a world of big spenders, people who are spending too much money, and this is creating problem because balancing the budget and maintaining the budget in order is going to become a key issue for the future. As President George Bush said one day, after a long period of reflection, there is a lot of numbers in it, and he added, clearly it must be a budget. No, we will miss him. So we are in a situation where basically budgets are going to be in the forefront, and the way we are going to balance budget is going to become a priority for government. I think another situation which is interesting is how we are going to manage the tax pressure. I think it's important to know if it's good or bad news. These are the countries which have a tax pressure which is above 40%, and this is basically all the European countries. These are the countries which are between 30% and 40% of tax pressure, which is considered to be more or less acceptable. And these are the countries, and I took only two of them, which are under the 30% tax pressure. And you will see something which is interesting here. One of the problems of the United States of America, 23% tax pressure, is precisely that they have the lowest revenues in 40 years. So the problem of the U.S. is not only overspending, it is a lack of revenues, of fiscal revenues. You cannot spend the money you don't have. And this is exactly what the U.S. has done and what the U.S. government has been doing. This is a very big issue for the future, and this is an issue where I think we will have to deal with it because we need to have the right revenues in order to spend the right amount of money. The prevailing system we have had so far, and that applies to the U.S. and Europe, was the following. Number one, we want everything. Number two, we want everything immediately. Number three, we want everything immediately with the money of the others. And there is a moment the system is breaking down. And the question becomes, how do you find money? There are many ways of finding money, but the first one, and it is also the mindset, is that to realize that we have to fight these government spending attitudes in some countries. These are the countries which are already spending 50% of their GDP more. The government spend more than 50%. There is something in common. They are all European countries, and that's why we have a problem in Europe. Actually, the winner is Ireland, where the government is spending 64% of the GDP. This is an exceptional situation for this year. I mean, in Thailand, it's only 18%, so you still have some margin of maneuver, but don't abuse it. So this is very important, a very big disease. The second one is that you have to work on your image, on the credit worthiness of a country. The best definition of credit I could find was done by Charles Dickens, the English writer, who one day said the following about credit. Follow me carefully. He said, credit is a system whereby a person who cannot pay gets another person who cannot pay to guarantee that he can pay. And when you think about it, it's a crazy system. But this is exactly what we have now. We have governments which are bankrupt, guaranteeing other governments which are bankrupt that they can pay. It will not continue to work a long time like that. We have to deal with creditworthiness and the attitude of government. Now, the real issue is that we need to put all this into order for a very simple reason. Actually, if you are looking at what's happening during the past and when the recession are taking place, these are the last one. I mean, despite everything, July 81, July 1990, March 2001, December 2007, these are the last recession. Now, you don't need to be a genius in mathematics to realize that they are taking place every 9 to 10 years. Every 9 to 10 years, the world economy has a recession. And it means the following: if the same pattern is going to be reproduced in the future, the next recession is before the end of the decade. And the issue is, when the next one is happening, do we all have enough money to confront this situation? And that's why everybody is worried. I think we have been firing all our ammunitions, and it's going to be very difficult to confront the next one. I have been addressing now only one part of the subject, which is those who are overspending, the debt, but we should go on the other side, because obviously if some people are overspending, other people are doing better. This is an American actor, any young man was very popular, and one day he became bankrupt. He was swimming into debt. He had no more money anymore. And then he stopped and he said the following. He said, actually, things could be a lot worse. And he added, I could be one of my creditors. And what is worse than having a problem of debt is when you are, the creditors. So let's look at the deeper revolution. What's happening on the other side of the world, and what is this revolution? I think the tip of the iceberg is really the monetary crisis that we have had recently. I want to show you the relationship between the dollar and the euro, because there is one thing which is very important. We had 143. This relationship, despite all the turmoil on the currency market, has not changed during the past 9 months. During the past 9 months, we are still between 141 and 143 between the two. So the two currencies are very much linked. They go down together quietly, but the two levels remain very much the same. If you are looking at the importance of this relationship, it's because the world currency holdings, we are still in a dollar's world. Despite everything which is being said, 60% plus of the world currency holdings are in dollar, 27% are in euro, and all the rest is marginal. Whether you are speaking about the pound or you are speaking about the yen, this is relatively marginal. And every currency, whether it is a currency in Europe getting close to the euro, will join one or the other. But for the first time, we have a currency which is raising. And this is obviously the yuan. And the real question is going to be to what speed the Chinese government is going to allow the yuan to appreciate. During the past months, it has gone by 6%. And I think there is a policy now to let it go up quietly. Now, what is important is that these fluctuations in currencies are not the results of the economic situation. What really has an impact on currency fluctuation is something else. It is the amount of liquid money which is floating around the world. If you are looking at the emerging market, the foreign currency reserves of the emerging market today is $6,200 billion. This is money which is turning around the world. And the fundamental question today is, where will the money land? Depending on where it will land, it creates currency to appreciate or to devaluate. Remember, 2 years ago, the Chinese decided to invest massively into the yen. The yen went up while the economy was collapsing. What defines the currency today is very much now this excess of liquidity on the markets, which have an impact on all of us and which can be quite dangerous. What are the foreign currency reserves? As you know, the leader in the world is China, with more than $3 trillion in foreign currency reserve, followed closely by Japan. And we have a tendency to think Japan is in a difficult situation but has a lot of money. And this is where we are in the rest of the world. And this is interesting. Number 3 is Russia, followed by Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, Brazil, India, and Korea. This is a different world than in Thailand. You had $186 billion in foreign currency reserve. And there is always a tendency to find out, how am I going to invest this money? I seem to have read that the government has a lot of ideas at this stage. But this is really one of the key issues. It has to be invest, not spend. Now, if you take China, China is saying, all right, I need to put part of this money into liquidity, and they invest in U.S. Treasury bonds. $1,154 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. This is quite enormous. But then, if you want to diversify from the U.S. dollars, what is the only other currency which is big enough to take such a big amount of money? And the answer is the euro. And now China is building up its currencies reserves in euro, and that's why the euro, despite the situation in Europe, is still strong, because of this liquid money which goes into the euro. So the stability is already given by this excess of foreign currencies. $3,000 billion plus is what China has in store, and actually this is so huge as an amount of money that you can ask yourself, what can you buy with $3,000 billion? Actually, with $3,000 billion, you can buy IBM, Google, Microsoft, and Apple. Twice. With $3,000 billion, you can buy all the real estate buildings in Manhattan, or what is left after the storm. With $3,000 billion, you can buy them 10 times. $3,000 billion, you can buy the 50 top sport teams in the world 50 times. And you are sure you never lose a match anymore. So this is a huge amount of money. And the question is, when you have reserves, as you do have in Thailand, what do you do with it? And I think something extraordinary is taking place for the first time in history. We have the birth of a South-South bloc in the world economy. If you take a line which basically goes from Mexico to Moscow, and you look south of this line, you have 32% of the world economy today. South of this line, you have everything. You have size, money, brands, project, raw material, and technology. And you are part of this world in Thailand with huge opportunities. Last year, for the first time, 56% of the Chinese exports have gone not to the US, not to Europe, but to the other emerging markets. This is a major revolution. In Thailand, the progression of your export to China, to Australia, etc., is much bigger than to the US or Europe. We see this change in the world economy with more South-South business taking place and with a huge potential. A huge potential because the money is going to be invested differently. Part of the money today is going to be invested still in financial assets. No doubt about it, government bonds will be useful because you need liquidity. But we are seeing now more and more of the money being invested in infrastructure projects, local and regional. Everywhere around the world, the emerging market, infrastructure is the name of the game. Just in the Gulf region, you have $700 billion of infrastructure projects, entirely self-financed. And I think in Thailand, you have a lot of projects in this respect. The third big revolution is a lot of this money will be directed to buy industrial assets everywhere, buying companies everywhere outside the country. China, you have 700 Chinese corporations operating in Africa now, and buying everything they can and buying cash, these companies. But the big revolution, the most important revolution of everything, is that for the first time we see government money being used to finance the globalization of local companies. If you are looking China again, 21 of the 22 largest companies in China are state-financed, which means that one of the biggest holding company in the world, biggest financial holding company in the world, is probably the Chinese Communist Party. So we are in a new world where a lot of the money is used for the globalization of local companies, with a result of a world of new brands. These are the new brands which are hitting the market today. 10 years ago they did not exist, or they were not very well known. The globalization of brands, and this is absolutely striking, from China, from India, from everywhere. And if you just take higher, which you know very well for the air conditioning, Last year, Haier became the largest household appliance company in the world, passing over Whirlpool in the US. We are in a world of new brands affecting the enterprises, a world of new brands affecting also the financial community. These are some of the names of banks and financial institutions which have hit the market recently, not known 10 years ago. And finally, if you take the Fortune 500 global companies which has just been produced, 93 companies today on the Fortune 500 are now coming from the emerging market. So I think there is something absolutely fundamental which is taking place, the emerging of new brands, the emerging of local companies in Thailand and elsewhere, which are globalizing very quickly. And this will change the world economy. And the question is, what will be the impact on everybody else? I have the feeling that competitiveness 2.0 is going to be about national champions in the emerging economies, and as a reaction, more and more advanced economy going into reindustrialization. Industry is a core concept for competitiveness. Let's see what it means. Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, used to say about the United States of America, the big mistake we have been doing was the following. We have moved from an environment which was based on technology and export to an environment based on service and consumption. He says this was at the origin of the American problem, and we should all learn about that. Technology and export are keys. A very awkward situation is the following. If you take this harbor, this is Port Elizabeth in New Jersey, which I suppose today must be closed. But Port Elizabeth in New Jersey is a big container harbor. It's one of the 7 harbors of New York. If you are looking at this harbor, 45% of the containers leaving the harbors are leaving empty. They come full, mainly from China, and they leave back empty, which means the U.S. is not producing anymore. This is a balance of trade deficit. But there is something even more interesting. When you are looking at the ships which are coming inside the harbor, 50% of the Chinese export to the U.S. are made by U.S. companies operating in China. So actually, the products are American products, but they go into the U.S. because they are manufactured abroad. Again, something very interesting. Take your iPad, if you have one, despite everything I said before, turn it around and see what's written on the back of the iPad. It's written the following: designed in California and assembled in China. And I think that the key issue we have today is to make sure that our exports are not only export of foreign company operating in our country, but should be also export of local companies operating in the country. And this is manufacturing. And this led to this situation, Blondie, on globalization. Can you show us something made in America? Answer, sure, but it's over 30 years old. And that's exactly the problem. The product is American, but it's not made in America. The product is European, it's not made in Europe. Think about that in Thailand. This is very important. I know you are strong on assembling and everything else. It's important. Charles Dickens again said the following, rediscovering the made in. When you write on a product made in, it's a very important concept in competitiveness. He said industry is the keystone of prosperity and the soul of business. I'm not saying finance and service are not important. We have to find back that competitiveness is manufacturing and industry. Without that, we don't go anywhere. And the question becomes rapidly, what is the next business model because of all that? And I want to show you the size of the markets in 2050. And to show you that the size of the market in 2050, this is tomorrow. These are the United Nations forecasts. And to show you that this is tomorrow, in a generation from now, I want to take you a generation in the past to show you how close it is. This is how we look like 1 generation ago. This is President Sarkozy of France. This is how we look like a generation ago. Bill Gates of Microsoft probably must have done something wrong. This is how they look like a generation ago. You know who it is? Yes, this is Bill and Hillary Clinton. And when you look at this picture, you can tell yourself, in life, everything is possible. And the last one, this is how we look like a generation ago. You know who it is? This is Prime Minister Berlusconi of Italy. Yes, the only one that did not change. So things are going very quickly in the world, and I think we have to keep in mind that the markets are changing extremely quickly. So let's see where we are. This is the size of the markets today, and every 6 months it is updated by the UN. Let's see where we are in 2050. North America plus 60 million people in 2050. Latin America plus 240 million people in 2050. Europe, the only continent going down, minus 100 million people. Africa in 2050, fasten your seatbelt. These are the numbers. The official forecast by the UN, plus 800 million people. Africa is going to be a land of opportunity for all of us. And Asia, of course, plus 1.2 billion. You are the center of a major revolution, which is also one of demography, one of population, which is going to be important. And again, the engine of growth are going to be different. I mean, there is part of the population which is going to be emerging middle class. The emerging middle class is going to be an engine of growth in Asia, in Thailand, probably in the urban area of Asia, of China, etc. 3.6 billion people very soon, really motivated by money and consumption. Give me money and I consume. This is what I mentioned before. But for the first time, we start to see the emergence of a new class, which is going to be absolutely fundamental to the development of the world economy, which is the emerging less poor. This is this part of the population which is not yet middle class, but which is escaping from absolute poverty. And this emerging less poor needs special products for them. And that's why you have the $100 PC made by Negroponte in the US. This is why Tata in India is building the $2,500 car, because you need to provide that to these people. This is why you have everything about microfinance and microcredit. And this is why you have the birth of mobile money, using your cellular phone to pay. And mobile money was not invented in Europe, was not invented in the US. Mobile money was invented in Kenya, in Africa. I think that these emerging less poor are going to be essential to the world economy. And in a country like Thailand, where you have a very strong population living in the countryside, this is a very important concept. A new business model which can be given as an example, if you take water. Water is a crucial problem because 1.2 billion people in the world do not have access to safe water. About 80% of the diseases of the world are coming from water, which is not clean. So somebody like Tata in India is making the Tata Swash Purifier. It's a machine you can have in your home. It purifies the water. It works for 8 months without battery. And he's putting that on the market at $16. And I think this new business model for the emerging less poor is going to be a key engine of success for the future. Aging, and it was also said in the government policy, is essential in the world. The median age of the world is going to change enormously. Today, the median age is about 28 years old. In 2050, the median age of the world is going to be 40 years old. So we need to produce things for the aging population, because the most fundamental revolution in terms of aging is the following. Life expectancy in the world is today increasing 5 hours per day. Because of medicine and everything, 5 hours per day increase in life expectancy, which means the following. At the end of my presentation this morning, your life expectation will have been increased by 11 minutes. If you want, I can speak longer. Although I think the organizer would not like it. And the question is, do we save enough for this? And the question is the following. Remember that. Explain to me again why enjoying life when I retire is more important than enjoying life now. And a lot of the younger population do not see this saving process as being important. I think the mindset is also about saving. So let me conclude by addressing more particularly the problem of mindset and why it is so important in terms of competitiveness. Number one, you have many ways forward to go and to find how things are going to be. The first one is think globally. Number two, act locally. Number three, panic internally. But if you want to go beyond that, you have something more to do. And I think it was very well expressed by Thomas Jefferson. He said, nothing can stop the one with the right mental attitude. And I think this is so correct. And then he added also, and nothing can help the one with the wrong mental attitude. But it's true. It's a question of mindset. It's a question of attitudes. And the value system of a country is evolving in 4 phases. The first one, you have no defined standard. But the first one is about hard work. This is what you have in Korea, 54 hours a week of hard work. The second phase is when you reach Singapore, when people are saying, yes, we are working hard, but we want some revenues now. We want also to get more increased revenues. The third phase is social participation. That's where Japan is today, where basically you say, I work hard, I have money, but I want to be involved in society. I want to be consulted on decisions. I want to be part of leadership. And the last phase, which is the one where we are now in the US and Europe, is the one of self-achievement, where people are saying, I am more important than the country in which I live. I am more important than the company for which I work. Self-achievement. And every country around the world is going through those 4 phases. And I let you imagine where Thailand could be today. But the thing is that the more you go, the less it has an impact on manufacturing, productivity, and competitiveness. But the more you go, the more it has an impact on innovation, which is very well the ability to have people which are individual and rethinking the system. I think that you cannot fight this evolution, you can only manage it. And it is very much impacted also by urban and non-urban situation. I think in the urban world, we are very much already in the self-achievement environment. And we are moving in every society from collective values to individual values. It's happening everywhere. And hard work has been everywhere in every country. I discovered a press clipping which is interesting. This is from the New York Times on Friday, the 3rd of August, 1923, when the U.S. was announcing that the 12-hour day was ending in the steel industry 6 days a week. And I think we don't realize how much the Industrial Revolution was based on hard work. We are in a different world today, but everybody is going through that. And of course, the question is, again, very much seen when we are looking at what the others are doing. If you take China today, and this is Nanjing Road in Shanghai, and you make an opinion poll and you have the Chinese population, what are the keywords which reflect best your objective today? 68% of them are saying work hard and get rich. The work hard, get rich mindset is driving Asia today, is driving probably Brazil and other countries, and it's a very powerful one. It's a very powerful one because it is evolving with time. The question is, what about our children? Do they recognize themselves in this work hard, get rich approach? And when this conference is finished, I propose you go back home, you call your children and you say, come here, I have to talk to you. I have heard that in China, the name of the game is work hard and get rich. My son, my daughter, do you recognize yourself in this value system? And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, well, actually, you can happily forget about the first part of the sentence and go immediately to the essential. Get rich without working hard. And look at the role model today, rock star, football players, etc. It's all about getting rich without working too much. And this is a real problem in the world today. And if you are looking at this attitude of quick money, which is really what it is all about, you have the icons of Facebook, and these are young guys becoming billionaires at 26 years old. But if you are looking at the next generation, the younger one, and you ask them, come here, I have heard that your older brother and your older sister in life, they don't want to work hard, they just want to get rich. My son, my daughter, what about you? And they are going to look at you in the eyes and they are going to say, actually, if you want to know, I don't even want to get rich. And you are going to say, what? You don't want to work hard and get rich? You don't want to make money? You don't want to build your own house or to buy your own flat? And they are going to look at you and they say, but why, Mom? Why, Dad? Do you want me to work hard like an idiot to buy my own flat when you have already done it? All I have to do is just to wait. And we have this wait-and-see generation with a mindset, which means that the world is split in two, with a generation which is work hard and get money, which is what you have in India, in China, and I hope in Thailand. And then you have another generation where the name of the game is work-life balance. Don't push me too hard. Don't do too much. And this very same relationship you are going to find actually a bit everywhere. Managing value and lifestyles take place also in an enterprise environment. If you see your working life in an enterprise until 65 years old, everybody starts as being a tiger. Everybody starts with a mindset, a value system which is about really company achievement. I am a tiger, I am mobile, I am looking for something to kill everywhere. And basically I am motivated by work and success. All my students at university, they enter life like that, as a tiger. And suddenly after a certain time in the company, a major revolution is taking place. You get married, you get children, you get a mortgage, and from a tiger you transform yourself into a cat. Which is basically you are going to say, I am motivated by social achievement. I am mobile during the week, but the weekend I want to be back home, and I want during my home, I want to see the family. I am mobile, but until a certain extent, I am really motivated by work-life balance, and that's what we see more and more. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, after a long time in the company, your mindset change again into something different, and you transform yourself into something else. Where basically you are now motivated by personal achievement, where you are telling people, I have spent enough time in this company, don't talk to me about company strategy, don't talk to me about objectives, leave me alone, forget me. I am motivated by life balance, which is, by the way, very good for the tourist industry. So, you have to manage those change in companies as you have to manage them in countries. And this is a very big issue. Now, obviously, some of my students, when I show them that, they tell me, well, Prof, if the name of the game is to become one day a cat, why don't I start immediately by being a cat? And I have a lot of those kids who says, you know, I don't want to work too much anymore. We are in a world where, as Peter Drucker said very nicely, the changes in societies have a deeper impact on companies than the changes in management. When you are looking at the challenges to us, whether they are on the environment, on ethics, on everything, they come from society. They don't come from management techniques. One of the biggest changes we have today is about social networks. Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter are really having an enormous impact on us and forcing transparency and everything. And basically, and you are going at this conference to discuss ethics and everything else. Mark Twain, the American writer, said the following. He said, it's very important to be ethical, never do wrong. And he added, especially when somebody is looking. And today everybody is looking with a social network, and it has an impact on everybody. And then there is a good news, however, with the social network. It has a very good impact on leadership. And this is a question, do you have any leadership experience? Answer, yes, I have 6 people following me on Twitter. Today, everybody can become a leader. Then you have the danger of overthinking. We are in a world where we have to take decisions, where we have to take action very quickly. This is a golfer. This is Ralph Guldahl. He was a genius at golf. He was the equivalent of Tiger Woods before the world in the U.S. He won 2 U.S. Open, 1 Master. He was a genius. And one day he stopped and he says, how can I be so good? How can I be so excellent in my golf? And he started to think about it and to analyze. And then he made a very big mistake. He wrote a book. The book was called Groove Your Golf, full of equations, full of pictures. And from the day he published his book, he never won 1 single tournament anymore. He has been overthinking, and he got scared like hell to act. We are in a world where everything is possible, as you can see with this Chinese artist. And there is a Chinese proverb I like very much which tells us, let's be ready for everything. And the proverb is the following: the person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. And this is so true. How many times we are told it is not possible? And let me conclude by two things on the mindset. The first one, which I like very much, is a quote by Albert Einstein about the way we should approach the future. And Albert Einstein is saying the following. He said, you know, logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. If you are only logical, you will only reproduce the past. Imagination will permit you to invent the future. And in order to invent the future, you need to have a mindset of success, which is very well explained by this man, Jean-Baptiste Charcot, a French explorer. Jean-Baptiste Charcot went to the North Pole. Jean-Baptiste Charcot went to the South Pole. And in order to do all these adventures, he had a ship, which is very useful when you're in this business. You need a ship. And he gave that ship a wonderful name, which is le pourquoi pas, which is basically translated by why not. And I think that this why not mindset is really the name of the game. And this why not mindset is what triggers imagination. Robert Kennedy used to say there are two types of people in the world. Those who are seeing problems as they are, and they always ask the question why. And those who are dreaming of things that never were, and they always ask the question why not. And we need people with a why not attitude. But we need also people with an attitude of why not now, which is triggering energy. The question is not tomorrow, it is now. And this is essential. And finally, we need also the attitude of the why not me, which is triggering commitment. And how many people do we have in companies who says exactly the contrary? They say, actually, why me? I didn't do anything. So remember, the why not attitude is the name of the game. The why not mindset is the secret of success. And I'm sure that in Thailand, you have plenty of it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.